This world is broken. The science is outdated, the math is incomplete, and the people are so blinded by greed that they cannot see the way forward.
Wait. You're not thinking of intervening, are you?
It has to be corrected. Knowledge is not a commodity. It has been and always will be their future. Standing in the shadows is no longer an option. We have to teach them to share freely without fear of retribution.
There is too much to teach for just one person.
I know. We will have to recruit more people who think the right way. The people who have been shunned by the mainstream. People who have the passion in their heart for the science.
How do we find all of these people then?
We create an open forum to discuss ideas and build ties. We let everyone have a voice, and we never let greed dictate our path.
What do we call it then? Oh, I got it. The Fringe think tank.
The Fringe think tank it is then. Now let's give them back their destiny and open it up to the world.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Builds. We have the benefactor here today, and we have a special guest. Soloma is here today, and we're going to have an interesting talk. We're going to go into a little bit of a UFO experience and a real understanding of a religious experience that came with it. So I hope you guys are all ready today. It's going to be awesome. How you guys doing?
Great.
Very well. Thanks for having me today, guys.
Thank you for coming in. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This is going to be really great. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. It'll be the first time I'm going to extensively share my story and where that's led to a deep fundamental understanding of our shared reality. And, hopefully we all can get something out of it.
Right on. Well, if you're ready, you can go ahead and start from the beginning and tell us exactly what happened.
Well, so I suppose this is going to be more of a life story that's leading up to having transcended space-time last year in October. I perceived it at the time as ascending. So to backtrack, when I was a little boy, my parents, they split up, and I lived with my mother and my sister. And we always tended to live in apartments. And at a very young age, we lived in a complex where I perceived I was experiencing something different, something I couldn't explain, something that scared me. So, being this young boy experiencing something that I didn't understand, it was like I was scared of the little men that would come for me at night. I mean, I can recall picking my nose and putting it on the wall to discourage them from messing with me, that hopefully they would think I was gross. I mean, this was the logic of a 6-7-year-old boy at the time. So, I was scared of everything. I was little. I held on to my blanket and my pacifier way longer than most kids did. And finally, my family helped separate me from these things. And not too much longer, I actually experienced my first UFO. It could have been 2. It may have been the same one. It could have been 14. I really don't know. All I can relate was I was outside of the building and there were older people with me. More like I was with them.
Yeah.
So we all saw these V formations of light. There were 7 of them. And it was like looking at a fish swimming in water. You could see them moving effortlessly through, but you don't hear it. So there were 2 of them, 2 V formations. They dominated the sky. They were much larger than the apartment buildings themselves. I mean, I remember running inside, mommy, UFOs, only to be met with, there's no such thing. So that really started me on my journey of trying to figure out exactly what was going on. I was having, relationship problems with my family, to the point where, it was issues at night with whatever was going on with the abductions or whatever, being scared of the little men, and, not necessarily being able to get along with really anybody in my family. So at some point, I promised myself that I would figure out how things work. And if I did, that maybe I could help change the world, that maybe I might be able to benefit myself and others, save my mom, because obviously she was troubled. So, that time is interesting for me. I have vague memories of being taught. I remember my mother took us to this, I guess it's like a hippie commune, and vague memory of maybe something happening there. I mean, concepts like the Pleiadians, the soul, enlightenment. I remember thinking about Uri Geller and his spoon bending. I associate the concept of walk-ins with this time in my life. And that was, the first time that I offered myself up to God to work through me, because everything seemed inverted to me. I kept calling it Bizarro World, the inverted Superman guy, because Super Friends were a thing back then, right?
Yeah, I remember
So,
that.
yeah, that was, again, I was trying to make sense of the world, and that's how I was, associating. I was seeing inversion. Nothing made sense. It was all do as I say, not as I do. It seemed like everybody lied to me, and it was just this weird, what is going on? So all of this, the search started when I was very young, and school was an issue. I would ask questions. Who are these people that are writing these books? Why should I believe them? I would go into the library and question myself, fiction and nonfiction. Why is this confusing? Why does it seem like this is actually inverted to me? Because fiction sounds like fact to me, faction, fact. And nonfiction then kind of sort of sounds like not fact. But the fiction is make believe, and the nonfiction is supposed to be more closer to truth. And it just, the whole time, I'm like, it's all inverted.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And it like seems to begin on, all sorts of fundamental levels. So obviously I had a rough time in school. I wasn't really attracted to any of it. I did just enough to graduate from high school. I never found anything that really attracted to me in structured education. By the time I was getting out of high school, I was more focused on the partying and the experiences that came with the partying. It was the beginning of, how drunk could I get and still function, to where when I finally quit drinking in 2000, it was like I was a functioning blackout drunk. I was a
Yeah.
mess, you know? So, school, got through it and worked, did a little bit of retail sales. And the whole time it was mostly avoiding this underlying responsibility that I felt that I had, that I felt like that I took on, avoiding my life, trying to get lost in whatever I could, especially the partying, the girls, the booze, and thank goodness for the cannabis. So, it's a pretty basic, typical story. You know, I was lost for a long time, purposefully. You know, I just didn't want to deal with reality,
Yeah, we all
and
cope in our own ways.
for sure, for sure. And finally, it got so bad for me. Well, actually, uh, I was living on a farm. I was blessed to stumble into an old summer cottage kitchen on a 250-acre farm when
Nice.
I was about 20, 21. Oh my gosh. You just can't imagine. The rent, I mean, was just so ridiculously cheap. And, you know, I was a complete mess. You know, always drinking, always out partying, drinking and driving, no responsibility, you know, and if whatever current job I had, you know, was pushing me in the wrong way, it didn't phase me to leave it in the least bit, you know, to just drop it like a hot potato, you know. So these people were angels. I love them so much. The farmer, the landlord on this property, was like the father that I always wanted. This man actually listened and had some wonderful sage advice. Sometimes he had no advice. You know, it was just a really fantastic close to 20 years of my life. And midway through was when I managed to, you know, wreck my car for the umpteenth time. Actually, that story was one of the first times that a direct prayer that I made was obviously answered. As I had been working in a town that was like 30, 45 minutes from where I lived, and I happened to go through just like it was a meeting we had, and I went down for the meeting, but I didn't have to work, and I just started drinking and smoking all day, and this ended up with me closing down bars in another town not too far away from me and hopping in my car and seeing cars coming over a hill and going, I wonder what was going on over there, and finding another little bar that I didn't know about with the people that were coming out that worked there. And I'm like, hey, I've got a nice little bag. I bet you guys have some beers and a pool table. And we all were like, yeah, you know. So that ended at like 5 o'clock in the morning. It started at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
And I'm driving home, and I end up putting my car into the guardrail on a curve, on a specific curve, and I crack my car in half.
Yeah.
And right, you know, so I'm totally awake and I'm driving home. My back end of my car is dragging on the road, and it's kicking up sparks. And I'm like, God, just get me through this. I am so done with this. I will never do this again. I'm just done. And I'm driving, and here comes a cop, right? Just plain as day. And I'm just like, And I'm sitting there and I'm driving through, and that would have been like a third strike for me. You know, that probably would have been some jail time. And somehow I got home. You know, he didn't see the sparks. He didn't pull me over. And next thing I know, that morning, my landlord's knocking on the door, checking on me. And he had just lost a granddaughter, young girl, to drinking and driving. And I couldn't help but just bust out crying, you know, because I was completely out of control. And, you know, that was it. I never picked up again. And it changed my life. I still partook of cannabis. I still do to this day. I have a bong sitting next to me. I'm sure I'll be partaking through the course of this show. And so anyway, this place, this farm, you know, a lot of experience there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did it kind of give you like a new lease on life? You kind of let go of the old stuff and brought in a whole new understanding of your surroundings?
Yeah, I mean, you know, once I started to clear myself up of being that, you know, that drunk, that blackout drunk, you know, it's just like, my gosh, how good do I have it? and so thankful for all of it. But that even too has been a work in progress. I mean, in my own way, I was still a bit of a mess, to the point where it all accumulated in a 7-week ordeal of where the UFOs came back into my life in a very, significant way. So I guess, that's probably where we should pick up or continue.
So hold on, they didn't come around you while you were drinking and everything else when you were a child and you were innocent. They did. Went away when you went to avoid everything, and then
Well,
now.
I don't know. Yeah, you have to understand, I was blacked out drunk. Who
Oh,
knows
okay.
what they were doing, when I was out. I mean, I would have been awake and out, and also not awake and
Oh,
out.
no, I
You know what I
understand.
mean? I'm sorry.
Hmm. I
Yeah, I mean, I
understand.
I was a functioning blackout drunk. They could have done whatever they wanted, and I'd have no clue. I actually contacted a girlfriend who lived with me for a couple of years on that farm sometime later, when it all started to unravel, and I asked her, I was like, did you ever remember anything strange at night, just to see, because I was looking for answers, for explanations. And she didn't. So I don't know in between whether or not there was any sort of interactions. I actually do not have direct memories of abductions. It's vague stuff. Being returned to where I was sleeping in a different spot. And I don't sleepwalk. I've never identified myself as sleepwalking. Nobody's ever identified me as sleepwalking. I've been able to see that, hey, I wasn't here and now I am.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I really don't know what sort of relationship I might have had with them during the blackout years, but when 2009 rolled around, it really just kind of went crazy for me. So it was April of 2009 that year, and my landlord actually died on the 2nd. And I love that man, right? He just was fantastic. And a week later to that day, I find myself in my apartment on the farm, and I'm out of food, and it's getting to be in the evening, and I decide to hop in my car and go to the grocery store. So I'm driving down the back country road, and in the sky I see 8 white lights. One is horizontal, one set of 4 is horizontal to the ground, the other is like at a 45-degree angle. Excuse me. So I see this, and my first thought is, oh boy, here we go again. So I'm driving in towards them and trying to justify what I'm seeing. Like, yeah, these are bi-wing airplanes with lights in between the wings. And so I'm driving, and to my left is a junkyard type farm. And that farm exists at the T intersection that I have to make a right on. And
Okay.
as I'm making a right, to the left is another farm that these lights are right above. I mean, I was even perceiving them to be suspended construction lights. There must be something going on in the farm, that there's some sort of construction. So I, drive up and I make the right-hand turn, and I'm looking at these things. I'm going, it's none of the above. It's none of these things. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I looking at? Holy cow. And, do I drive into this driveway and knock on the door? Do you guys see what I'm seeing? And there's no lights on in the farmhouse, and I don't see any cars there. It's like 7:38 p.m. in the evening. I don't recall that it was quite dark yet.
Hmm.
And so I pull in there, and my lights cross the path of these things. And as soon as that happens, they start like beelining towards me, coming down out of the sky towards me. And I turn around, I'm full on freaking out. I'm just going bonkers. In my rear view mirror, I see a car pulling up behind me. So I'm now returning back to the T intersection, and I have to turn left to go back towards my house because
Mhm.
I'm chicken shitting. I'm chickening out and hightailing it home.
Yeah.
And I'm looking right above me, and here are these things right above me, tracking me at like 25, 30 miles an hour, right above the treetops. And I'm thinking to myself, if this is going down, it's going down here now. So, like, I stopped and pulled over in front of that junkyard farm that's now on my right-hand side, and I kind of backed in, and I realized that car that had been coming behind me is pulling up. So I hop out of the car, and here these things are right above. And there's like this blue encompassing light that is encompassing everything, and like a pinpoint red light that is shining down. And I really can't figure out what I'm seeing. So I'm, making a motion to this car that's pulling up, roll down your window. I'm, making the motion with my hand, and they start slowing down. And I'm like, roll down the window. And they stop and start backing up. And I'm like, putting my hands out and try, roll the window. And they do. And it's two young guys. And I'm like, are you guys seeing this? Do you see this? And I'm pointing upwards, and they look at, and they're like, holy, they're
Yeah, they
flipping
just
out
lost it right there, huh?
completely, right? So they seem to be like nonchalantly, maybe a couple miles an hour, just going, in the direction that I originally came, towards the farmhouse where I live. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, now it's time to go back towards the grocery store. I'm going to flim flam them, right? So
Yeah.
I hop in the car, and, I leave these two young guys, underneath these craft, and I'm now driving back towards the store. I'm making the right to go that way, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I specifically see two saucers. And one of them banks to its left, which would have been my right. I'm turning right, banks like doing no miles per hour at all. It literally banks like a normal plane. And I don't know. I later on, like 7 weeks later, I end up having a very vivid dream, which I attach to continuing that experience.
Now, hold on. Did you get away and get to the store?
Yes, I
You kind
actually,
of skipped over it.
yeah, I mean, I ended up at the store, and I'm in line. I get my stuff, and I look at the girl at the cash register, and I'm like, has anybody been reporting anything strange in the sky tonight? And, she, of course, looked at me rather strangely and said no. So I went home, and that's when the 7-week ordeal started. Like, there was the beginning of a presence in my life that I couldn't explain. You know, yeah, all sorts of strange things started to happen. The perceptions of the shadows in the corners of the eye, corners of the vision, on the peripheral vision, seeing things there. The knocks and the pings around the house, knocks on the door, just strange things that I couldn't explain that were kind of terrifying to me, because of what had happened to me as a young kid and what I had just experienced. It was, difficult for me to deal with, even though I was an adult.
So do you think you were on just high alert, or do you think there was actually something messing with you?
I'm sure it's a little bit of both. you know, in retrospect, because that was just the beginning of it all. I would have to look back. It would have been the 9th, that day, the 9th of April in 2009. And, you know, I've kind of documented this stuff over the years on various websites. And at the time when it was happening, I wasn't really doing any of that sort of thing. I wasn't on any sort of social media. I was still knee deep in escaping. I was still doing a lot of video gaming.
Hmm.
So, you know, I'd fallen into the massive multi-user online gaming community of EverQuest back in 2000 when I quit drinking. Like I had to find a substitute for all that time I was spending.
Yeah.
And one of the nights that I spent partying with some people that I worked with netted me them playing this game called EverQuest. And they were both affected by this game. You know, they were kind of crazy about it. And I remembered it when, you know, I was trying to find a substitute for the time, and I got into it, and holy cow, did it take hold of me, right? You
Yeah.
know, it was rather intense. And for me, that part of my life really blossomed because it was an outlet for the processor. Like EverQuest early on, and I guess we're going to backtrack a little bit here, and I apologize for that. Uh, EverQuest actually turned out to be a job for me at some point. It was like a year and a half into my playing, like by 2001, mid 2001, 2002. I had come across a program, a third-party program that forced the EverQuest game into a window mode, so I could play 3 accounts at one time.
Oh,
And
wow.
doing that allowed me to open up like a sort of farming type mentality where I was running my own group with, not surprisingly enough, what was considered the holy trinity of the game back then: the warrior, the priest, and the enchanter. And what drove everything for the game, for the way that I was able to make money through it, was my enchanter. And the enchanter reflects the mind. It was all about controlling the situation, the encounters, you know, charming, mesmerizing. I I was an exceptional enchanter, and playing off of that enchanter with my warrior, and I think they're actually called clerics in EverQuest. You know, I was able to turn that into a profession on I, what was the site? Players Auction. We were able to sell actual, you know, the digital gaming items, the the currencies. I mean, my first sale was $1,500 to a guy on my server, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
it was nice. It was early on in that, kind of genre. I mean, all of the kind of stuff is the precursor to what cryptocurrency is now. You know, it's vapor rare currency. You know, that's where all of that came from.
Yeah. So
You know,
let's go back to the UFO experiences. Did they come
sure.
back around?
Oh, well, it was 7 weeks in
Okay.
2009. Um, that first experience again was on the 9th, and then the 16th was maybe an experience of the UFO that had a very bizarre shape, and it was a red blinking light that just casually passed over the power lines that were running through the farm. I was I was perceiving it like a teapot that had a hole in the center. I mean, its shape made no sense to me. And it was blinking on and off red. It was just going, look at me. And by this time, I had perceived I was being abducted. I mean, I think, so that would have been the 9th, that would have been 16th. We have to dial it back to, that was like Easter Sunday. So I got a little bit ahead of myself there. The first encounter was the 9th, and then I think it was Easter Sunday, Easter Monday, that I was actually abducted, at least I perceive it to be, as at the time I was growing a shamanic garden in the top floor, which was the bedroom, because this little cottage was 2 stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically like a loft 1-bedroom apartment. And so I had a garden upstairs, and I was sleeping on the couch down in the basement or in the bottom floor, which was, better serving for heat and, air conditioning anyway. And that's the first time that I woke up reversed on the couch. And when I woke up, like everything in the living room was lit up, like moonlight lit up. And all of a sudden it just shut off. And then my brain is like boiling, bubbling in my head all of a sudden. I'm not sure if that was happening from when I woke up and perceived the light, or if it happened, it was like all right there. And I'm like, what's going on with my brain? It feels like it's on fire. And I went into the kitchen and pulled a knife out of the block and went upstairs, and I'm looking around. I'm like, what's going on? And I went out downstairs, and I've got this knife in my head. What's going on? And I'm totally, freaking out. I'm having a hard time with all of it.
Looking for the aliens? Is that what you're doing?
I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, because I really don't know what's happening. I mean, what just happened? Why was my brain boiling? What was the light that was on and off? Why am I, waking up in a reverse position than when I went to bed? So, I mean, this whole time, I'm not sleeping. I mean, for practically 7 weeks during this time frame, I couldn't sleep. It would get to dawn whenever the sun would come up, and I might actually drift off. And the times that I did, I was having these intense visual dreams that involved saucers, UFOs, specifically saucers that seemed to be plaguing me at the time. I was having these strange phone calls that had these weird electronic, it's hard for me to describe. I've never really been able to describe it because I've never heard it before. That would kind of flip me out when I had them. I was having problems connecting to the internet. It was dial-up back then. Just really a lot of strange stuff was going on constantly, and there was continual interaction, like kind of up close and personal UFOs. I mean, this one on the 16th wasn't that far away. I mean, it would have been 1,000 feet, maybe 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet at most. Across the farm.
Wow.
And it happened like continually on Thursdays, like the 23rd, I believe, were orbs. I think what happened that evening, if I recall correctly, was the sky was like lit up with all kinds of terrestrial looking craft and some things I wasn't quite so sure about. I mean, I perceived it like it was like a Star Wars film. Like there was all sorts of stuff happening, and it wasn't something that I, had ever realized before.
Okay.
My landlord's daughter was actually there, and, I'm having a hard time with all of it, kind of a little bit manic, crazy. And I'm pointing out this triangle looking star formation that, I wasn't really familiar with. And it's like, doesn't this seem odd to you? And she's thinking, you seem really odd to me, And,
And she saw everything too?
well, no. She didn't see, I mean, I don't know what I was pointing out to her, and she wasn't really perceiving whatever I was perceiving as out of the ordinary. She was like, I'm hopping into the car and I'm going to the store or whatever. And she was basically dismissing me. And as she drove off, there was a triangle formation of lights that was right above the driveway. And I'm like, okay, I went inside. And the next thing I know, I feel like I need to come back out and check out this, formation of lights, because the triangle formation wasn't over the driveway. It was like on the other side of the house. And now I'm perceiving it over the driveway. And what I end up seeing was like a triangle UFO that is like now right above where we park our cars. And it's moving around the farmhouse and swinging around, that I come back around the back of the farmhouse to see where it's going. And it comes up around and is right above me, where I can feel it's like fields pressing down on my shoulders, and the pressure. And I think by this time, I had probably found myself on the UFO Hunter forum for the History Channel. I may have even reached out to MUFON, because I recall this specific encounter. I ended up calling MUFON like I was dialing 911, like, help me, UFO right above me. I mean, what are they going to do? But I'm, totally irrational and flipping out. So I think I had recently begun a new job. I'm in hospitality. I'm a server. And, I kind of have a tendency to jump from job to job, because I'm not necessarily so much about the money. I'm more about, just finding balance in everything that I do. And often work pushes me into a place, like it does for, I'm sure, many people, of imbalance. And since I don't necessarily carry the responsibility that other people do, like family, kids, caring about, materialistic things, having bills and all that sort of stuff, I'm able to, say, well, right now this isn't working for me, so I'm going to take some time off, see you later. So I was in the process of trying to work my way into a new position. It was actually a corporate job.
Okay, hold on. You got to get back to the UFO, because you keep
Yeah, I'm
leaving us
about to.
hanging on
No,
this stuff. It was
right. No.
it
It's
was
going. I'm
above
going.
you, and then
Right.
what happened there? Did it just go away, or did it try to
Yeah.
do
Well, I
something?
went in and called, MUFON, and then I went outside, and it was gone. And I think also by this time, I was also sharing and looking for understanding of my experiences on the Quonset Hut Forum, which is dedicated to the work of Thomas Townsend Brown, who has supposedly defied gravity. His daughter, Linda Brown, found me talking about my experiences in real time on the UFO Hunter Forum. And she said, come on over to this, forum. Your experiences are interesting and might, have significance with my father's work. And, I'm not thinking about all that kind of stuff. I'm like, please, somebody explain this to me. I'm looking for external explanation to all of this. So I find myself on this forum, and I recall, actually discussing with Linda that pressure that was coming down on my shoulders, that she even said that she had experienced it herself through her father's work. Who knows if that is true or not. That whole experience with the Quonset Hut Forum and their crew was an incredible learning experience for me, as was finding myself on the Godlike Productions forum around the same time.
Okay.
You know, like this 7 week ordeal, there was constantly stuff going on. You know, you've got to remember, during this, I'm also beginning to get fed negative thoughts. You know, like I'm looking for understanding and explanation, but I'm getting these weird guiding, you know. At one point, I was guided to perceive that people in my situation were often serial killers. So I'm, you know, all of a sudden looking at this rabbit hole and going, what? And then identifying with some of these things that I'm finding. And it starts to like kind of snowball, and I'm getting all these terrible feelings inside, and I'm getting these nudgings to hurt people. And I don't understand what's going on. You know, this has never been me. I've never had these sort of thoughts. I mean, I can distinctly remember my mother telling me that I would never hurt a fly. You know, that if, you know, I had some sort of choice, you know, that's just not who I am. And here I am, like, having all of these feelings and thoughts, and I can't explain why I'm having them, and they're physically affecting me. They're mentally affecting me. They're emotionally affecting me. And it seems to be building over the course of these weeks. You know, and it's hard to look back on all of it and be able to say when exactly all of these things happened, and when, you know, it's at this point, you know, the best I can do is kind of remember, okay, this was also happening, and it may have happened. You know, I'm doing my best to try to recall, but so that triangle was gone, but it was 2 days later when I was working at this new position, which broke that 3 week in a row experience of UFOs. It went from like Thursday night to Saturday night. I'm, you know, getting off. I had just finished training, and this is in a populated area. And
Okay.
I'm heading south on an overpass to a fairly busy highway. Not really a highway, I guess a 2-3 lane highway road going through a fairly populated town, at least in this area. And a huge craft, I mean, was super low, like right above a Best Buy. It was bigger than the Best Buy. It had these lights that were bluish, greenish, that sort of had a blend of the hues going out from the center to the outer edges of the craft. And there was like this red light that was bouncing back and forth under these bluish greenish lights, windows, whatever they were. And that red light was like the kit car red light, you know, from when I was growing up. I forget what that show was called, but the car had the light going.
The Night Rider.
Exactly.
So hold on. So you're over here in this populated area seeing this giant UFO, and no one else is stopping and yelling and screaming and seeing it?
So I have a video cam in the car, right?
Go
Just
ahead.
in case these sort of things are happening. And I'm driving south, and it's going from west to east. And, you know, it's going, I don't know, maybe 50 miles an hour, 40, 80, whatever. And it passes over. I mean, I get to the overpass, and I'm looking now to my left and thinking to myself, I'll never get it on the video cam, and nobody's pulled over, and we're not really. I actually was telling myself, this is not happening. This is not happening. It just couldn't possibly be happening because, you know, look at where we are and look how many people are around. Surely this isn't happening. I'm imagining this stuff. So I'm totally talking myself out of it as I'm driving myself home and having all of these continual experiences that I really don't understand and am developing a fear of.
So did you get this thing on camera? You said you had a camera.
No, no, no.
You
I
didn't?
I don't have any sort of footage of UFO, but I mentioned to you guys earlier that I have my prayers on video being answered. That's maybe something that we're coming up upon that
Okay.
maybe you guys can help link or share or what have you. Ben, are you able to do that? If you're there, are you able to do that, Nathan? Do you know if you're able to
I don't
provide?
have any, and Ben has that stuff. So
So I have the link. Yeah, I could share the link that you sent me
Okay,
earlier.
okay,
Yeah, give me 1 second.
okay. Well, we're working up to that because that's the tail end of this 7-week 2009 ordeal. So,
Okay, there we go.
they also that night, again, with backtracking with the triangle, there were actually orbs that night too. There was an orange orb, as well as a red orb. Uh,
were they tracking around the craft or just around you, or where
No,
were they?
no, no. These were actually off in the distance, and the orange orb was the first thing that I saw that night. And it kind of was bouncing up and down and actually went below the tree line. And then the red orb was seen after that and actually disappeared into itself, just kind of imploded, I guess I might say. And that was prior to the triangle and why I was, kind of flipping out and identifying the stars as a triangle formation and being odd to my landlord's daughter. So there was quite a bit of stuff going on. And I mean, there were nights where I was screaming to the ceiling, "You're not going to get me. I'm not going to give in to this. F you." Probably would have appeared rather crazy and really irrational being in conflict with nothing. Somebody will, you're you're shaking your fist at the ceiling, and it's because I was in a spiritual battle that I really, hadn't planned for. So,
So you took this as like you versus the aliens, and I don't understand. So you're probably just really upset and turned up inside, and don't know how to handle all the UFOs going on. Was there a point where you had any kind of contact or anything that could explain what was going on here?
so in retrospect, it was perceived as like a negative entity attachment because I can specifically point to the time and place where that attachment was separated. That's what the video of my prayers being answered is all about.
Okay.
So, and I didn't really understand this at the time. I was just praying for help. You know, I was talking about my experiences on various forums. Uh, One of them, I ended up on Above Top Secret. Actually, let me backtrack before that. During this time, my stepmother was having issues herself. She had some mass in her brain that she ended up having operated on. And the day that I went to the hospital that she was being operated on, I still hadn't been sleeping. This was really deep into the 7 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And, battling this spiritual experience that, hospitals being empathetic like I am, are tough for me. So I don't really like to spend time in them. So I went downstairs into my car to try and get some sleep because I wasn't sleeping, that maybe I'd feel a little bit protected in the parking garage and all the people and what have you, that maybe I might sleep. And I actually went out of body due to being exhausted and ended up in the room where my stepmother had finished surgery, had successful surgery. I actually, saw the end of it and knew that she was fine. And when I ended up coming back into my body and, waking up, it's like, okay, now it's time to go in. I know that everything's okay. So when I got there, found out that it was a successful operation. I'm like, yeah, I knew, but, you can't tell anybody that you just happened to experience it. And I had never experienced anything before like that.
So you
Now,
had an out of body experience. Were you at your house when this started, or were you at the waiting room?
so no, this was actually at the hospital in the parking garage
Okay.
where I went out of body into the hospital, into the room, realized that it was a successful surgery, back into my body, and realizing that, that she was good.
And
Also,
when you got up there and when you're back in your body, everything was good. She got surgery, everything worked out.
right. I was still exhausted, but and stressed out. But it worked out for her, and which was good. I just, for some reason, and maybe that reason is becoming more clear to me now, because she actually is the only one in my family that I'm really able to have any sort of conversation with about all of this. So there's like maybe this connection that I'm just making right now. So also, along that same line, out of body experience, during the same time frame when I had been praying for help, I was sleeping and had an out of body experience within a very vivid dream. Within this dream, there was an egg shaped craft of light that I see landing right outside my window on the other side of the fence where the cows would be. And I'm looking at this, from the living room behind my lazy boy and out through the window. And I see myself approaching this egg shaped craft of light, which has a being of light standing, like outside of it. And I see myself going up and interacting with this being of light in this egg shaped craft of light. And not too long after, I wake up and perceive that I had just negotiated away the rights to the farm somehow or some way. Everything that had been happening to me at the time, I was perceiving through a negative lens. Everything was just, this has got to be bad. So I had just somehow, it's not my farm, but that was the feeling I got. And it was most likely, in retrospect, that my prayers were being answered and they were probably looking for permission to operate, to do whatever they were going to do.
Okay.
I mean,
So
that's
you had this dream and you got rid of the farm in the dream, or they sold it. Did it happen in
no,
reality?
no. What I'm saying is that when I came out of that experience of having perceived my out of body experience self, there were two of me. One that's perceiving, a second me interacting with a light being with an egg shaped craft of life, that I don't really have that actual communication that second me had. Like, I could probably access it through some sort of regression therapy session. I've never
Okay.
done that. But when I came out of that dream out of body state, because it was a little bit of both, I had the feeling that I had negotiated away the rights to the farm. I can't explain to you why I had those thoughts other than I was perceiving everything from a negative perspective at the time. And it was most likely they were seeking permission to help me, that they were getting my consent to answer my prayers, which ultimately happened. I'm kind of making an association now after the fact that that light being experience led to the negative entity attachment that was feeding me thoughts, which were of the most heinous kind. This attachment was trying to lead me to hurt children of all things. I mean, it was so traumatic for me. I was still trying to have relationships with friends and family who were all having young kids at the time, So, like, I might be going over to my friend's house and, we're going to have a beer or two, maybe smoke a little and catch up. And I'm having all of these emotional, mental, physical issues with being in the proximity of his kids because there's this overlying something that is driving me to have these just, you know, I can't tell you how messed up it was. How messed up I was, and trying to balance it all and still try and have a life and not be completely off my rocker to everybody I perceived. I, that one position, that corporate position where I saw the one with the green and blue windows, lights, Knight Rider craft that
Yeah.
actually had an arm on the end of it that looked like it was shining a black light onto itself. I don't know. That's, what I remember. But from there, I moved to another restaurant. I was actually moving into a management position. And I was still trying to work through my understanding, my experiences with people in my life, which was, of course, a mistake because it only got me ridiculed and laughed at. And especially at this place that was, staffed in the kitchen by a classically trained French, I think he was CIA, Culinary Institute of America, and so was the sous chef. So these guys are already, have their noses stuck in the air and, or are giving everybody a hard time. So, I became, I guess a source of amusement for them with me sharing my experiences, which kind of played out and finished at this new place. So yeah, it accumulated, I guess, around June 1st
Okay.
when I was participating on the Above Top Secret website. I wasn't really participating there. I was still looking for understanding and explanation to my experiences when I found actually a couple of things for me. I found first some binaural tones music, which I was able to incorporate in with my meditations that I had begun to do to help try and deal with the anxiety and the stress and, maybe just expanding my perspective and helping me overall deal with all of it. It was called Bach to the Future. It was Bach music that had a bunch of frequencies that were meant to alter consciousness towards the alpha, theta, and delta, or maybe it was alpha, delta, and gamma states. So I started using that, which was rather effective. Like if people are curious about meditation, That sort of binaural work is very effective for achieving the relaxed, altered state of consciousness of alpha, theta, moving into, the delta, which is where
So,
the shamans and the seers and, the psychics, that's where they do their work, in these altered states of consciousness. You were going to say something?
yeah, did you just feel like out of balance and that would bring you back into balance in yourself?
I was completely out of balance. In fact, my family was so concerned, you've got to go get some help. And I was like, that's perfectly fine. And I told my mother and father, who had been separated for, I guess, when would this have been? For close to 40 years by then, that they both had to come with me. So all of us went into this, meeting with a psychologist. And this guy says, I think you need to find some balance. That was his suggestion. And he was right. I was very much out of balance. And I always have been, I have always perceived myself as being bipolar, that, I could ride those manic and those depressive, both of them. I experienced them in full in my life. And that in and of itself is actually a form of balance. You know both of those polarities very well. They're old friends. And I guess, at a certain level, knowing them, that in of itself is balance. But at that time, I wasn't. It was all, negative polarity for me. It had always been my whole life. Everything, from my father telling me no, 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 for everything, even to this day, to, just my mother, if I was out of line and she was dispensing her wisdom, she had a heavy hand, so it was constant fight or flight, trying to, get by in the world as a non-materialistic individual, a non-conformist, the black sheep. So that 2009 time frame, it was like April 4th to June 1st. I was, above top secret, and they were having a contact experiment, an open contact experiment that I decided to participate in. And there was a mantra that, we would all repeat. And I had that video camera that I talked about. It was my father's. It was a high 8 camcorder of some sort. I don't know if you remember the high 8 videotapes, but that was the sort of camcorder that it was. And I just decided to participate on my own. So I'm doing the mantra, I'm meditating, the farm dog George is, out and about and, giving me attention. And at some point, I'm looking around and I see a pure white plane. I've been seeing these pure white planes for the past 7 weeks, and I didn't really know what they signified. There was never any sort of jet engine noise associated with them. There were no markings associated with them. Sometimes there was multiple looking white planes, and this one happened to come down low over the farm. And, so I get up and I've got the video camera, and that's, where the tape that, or the video that you guys have a link to, that, I'm praying, I'm casting a wide net, save me, Jesus, save me, Archangel Michael, Buddha. At the very end of the videotape, I'm like, help me out, Sock. Sock is Socrates, the enigmatic teacher for Dan Millman in the book Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I really found a lot of solace in that book over my life. So I've read it a whole bunch of times. And, here I am praying to his teacher. And, so I'm following this plane, but I'm not really seeing it in the video camera because I'm not looking at it through the video camera. I'm following it with my eyes, and I'm just hoping I'm getting a shot of it. I don't know what I'm filming. I'm just getting this experienced adrenaline rush. Like, I kept associating it with like being on point, like it was some sort of adrenaline dump. But I'm now associating it with, in retrospect, is having the kundalini, my chakras opened up, because it was like energy pouring out of the top of my head when I was having these up close and UFO experiences. It was just such an energetic experience that I could feel it, like the energy would be pouring down the back of my neck and my back. And I always just associated that with the fear and adrenaline dump. But now I'm fairly sure they were actually opening up my chakras for me. So, it's now a new perspective that I have on all of those former experiences. I'm more in harmony with them today than I was at the time. So I'm filming, I'm praying, and next thing I know, I feel this metallic sensation in the pit of my stomach, and it starts just rising up. And, I'm feeling it, my mouth's watering, and the next thing I know, I'm spitting it out, and exclaiming, what the was that? And, from there, I put the video camera down, and I walk into my house, and I call my MUFON contact. And he's like, okay, we're going to come out and see you, and they fly out to see me the next day. I pick them up at the local airport, and they come out and do an interview and backtrack, to after I call him, I go to sleep on the couch, and I have that dream that I mentioned from the 9th. That was a continuation of that experience of with the two young guys in the car and the UFOs right above me. I'm having a dream of that night.
Okay.
I'm making an assumption that it's associated with that night, because in the dream, I'm in my car now making that right-hand turn. And all of a sudden, the UFO, the saucers, rise up from behind the hill on the left, and it's flashing red and blue lights, like intergalactic UFO cops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then to my right, the other one rises up, and it's got the blue and red lights flashing like intergalactic cops. And I'm driving, the next thing I know, I lose control of the driving, and the car is pulled off to the little parking space across from the farm. Or actually not across, it's at the next farm. And I'm pulled over, and there's this convergence coming onto the car. And it's just like this force, this, like, I don't know what it is. It's converged. And next thing you know, I'm meditating in my dream, trying to see through this experience within the dream, trying to get through it. And I couldn't. I wake up, and, my perspective was I had just experienced that first night that I was most likely abducted right then and there, that, that pullover, that converging experience. It's very likely that is when the negative entity attachment occurred, because that's right after that's when I started having all the peripheral shadow visions, the knocks, the pings, the strange phone calls, the weird feelings, the change in temperatures, pressure drops. I mean, it was pretty extreme.
So do you think your dream was trying to just recall the memory of what actually happened that night and fill you in to your conscious mind of what was going on?
I think it's possible. I think that, I was shown what happened, and because I didn't have that memory. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
remember we talked about it. I went to the store and I talked to the checkout girl, but I had no memory of anything happening. But this would directly tie in with that night. And since it seems like these sort of things are not affected by time and space, it wouldn't have been a problem for it to actually happen and me not to perceive it. It's happening on levels that we don't fundamentally understand, because these entities, both the good ones and the bad ones, are a little bit more evolved than we are. They understand these things better than we do, and in their own ways, both the positive and the negative polarities are acting as catalysts for our spiritual growth. This isn't a resolution that I was making at that time. I was still having a really hard time, and that wasn't the end of it. I mean, it's been ongoing ever since then, and I could talk about this, and there's more experiences. I don't know what our time is like, how much time we have,
No,
but
we're
I can
doing good on time. We got another hour.
Okay, so I mean, from there, it continued to happen. There were different experiences of UFO being up close and personal with me up through November 1st of 2010.
Okay.
One specific incident was I was actually dropped onto my mattress. I was now sleeping on a futon mattress on the floor downstairs. The futon itself, I had the head of it where I was having my pillow up against the couch, which is up against the steps that goes upstairs to this little farm cottage I lived in. And then the foot of my bed was facing a window, which I had fully opened so I could see what was coming, because I was still trying to deal with all of this stuff. So anyway, this particular experience, I was dropped from maybe 3 feet into my bed to where I hit the mattress and bounced up and looked out the window. And there was a saucer type UFO with a very bright red light with some different smaller colored lights to the outer edges of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of went away in the distance, but it was strange that that big main red light is what disappeared first, and the smaller colored lights were what remained the longest. It was, kind of like a paradox. It didn't make sense that it was happening that way. So that led to, I think, 2010, we had the Gulf of Mexico disaster, and I was knee deep into the mind control of godlike productions. I'm trying to figure things out. I'm, really disturbed by some of the things I was learning and seeing there, and not necessarily learning things, because a lot of it was probably BS. But, I had myself worked up, and my father came to visit. Unfortunately, we had always been in conflict. And this particular instance got a little bit of emotional and extreme with he and I, to the point where, it was about the Gulf of Mexico and how messed up everything is and how we are allowing it to happen. We're consenting to it. And it's all fundamentally our responsibility. And my father's like, you can't do anything. You shouldn't do anything. It's, just fall in line. And, that's not my way. So, I kicked him out. And, that of course bothers me. I've always had to separate myself. I just hung up on my old man a couple days ago, yesterday, today maybe. I'm not sure. And so he's getting in the car, getting ready to leave, and at the time I had the shamanic garden still, and I had been growing some Jack Herer, and it was like 15% THC at the time. I think a good friend of mine's like, man, this stuff makes me trip. It was, pretty powerful stuff at the time, and I was knee deep into smoking quite a bit of it because I was growing it. So I went out to my father, and my emotions when I'm in the high state can get fairly, fairly not extreme, but obvious, like other people can feel them. And, so I went out to apologize to my dad and hug him and tell him that I loved him, but I'm having problems, with the conflict. And he's like, so what are you going to do? And, I was like, I don't know, maybe I should go kill the guy. And the guy in reference was a CEO of some biogenetic tech company that was supposedly putting a carbon eating synthetic life form into the Gulf of Mexico. I've got myself all bent out of shape over all this stuff. And, maybe I should kill the guy. Maybe that'll solve it. And I threw my hands up in the air because I didn't know how to respond to him anymore. And that's the sort of stuff he understands, because I always would hear from him, I killed the son of a bugger of my mechanic who just screwed me over, or whoever has done him wrong, that's his mentality, right?
Okay.
And so, it didn't mean anything to me when I said it. And when I, walked away, it was over. And he was concerned over the conversation that he called, I don't know, authority. And the next day, I have some young guys, a young guy that I work with who brought another young guy over who, for some reason, brought his own ounce with him. And we're sitting around talking shit. And, excuse me. And next thing I know, there's a knock on the door. And it's my landlord's son, who is a cop, with other cops and, people who are concerned for my welfare because of my father. So I get busted. The poor kids that I'm with probably had a hard time of talking themselves out of it, but I don't think that they had any problems. And, so I'm arrested and committed to the local hospital, for psychiatric evaluation for 3 days, right?
Okay.
So I'm in this hospital and I'm seeing how they operate and how the poor people that are in this hospital are just drugged up and, fed crappy food. And, they were trying to do that to me. I think, medication might be beneficial for you. And I'm like, look, my father and I have a difference of opinion, and I tend to be a fairly emotional person. He misunderstood where I am. I care about what's going on in the world. I think we should be doing something. He doesn't. So, if you all are going to come at me and think that I should be taking medication, there will be a problem, because I have no intention of taking medication. I don't perceive myself as needing any. So,
Okay. So did you get out of the situation then?
I did. I managed to get out of the 3-day, and the day that I went home, this is leading somewhere. The day that I get home, my place is trashed, and I'm evicted. I get evicted, and so I get some time to get out of there. And during my stay in the hospital, I was praying for humanity. I was praying for the earth, because we're, kind of misguided. And I was, praying for help.
Okay.
So that night, I'm out of the hospital. I think it's, it's the morning now of November 1st. I think it was a Monday. And I'm having a UFO dream, like so often I had. And I'm with people. We're outside, and there are these blue UFOs out in the sky. And next thing I know, I'm inside a Quonset hut. with some other people. They may or may not have been alien in their nature, but some alien type individuals enter the Quonset hut with guns. They kind of look like those little Jawa dudes from Star Wars, right?
Okay.
Yeah, with guns. And one sticks a gun to my chest. Now, again, I'm sleeping on the futon mattress that is facing the window that was left open to see what is coming. I wake up and my window is full of light ships from top to bottom, both panes. Perfect formation. They're going from east to west. I mean, so fast. The both panes completely dominated. It was perfect formation. They're just going, by. And
Okay.
I'm trying. It's buzzing the farm. It's buzzing the little cottage that I'm in. My cat's spooked, nowhere to be seen. I go outside as the experience is ending. The dogs on the farm, nowhere to be seen. A few minutes later, my landlord's wife, who's still living on the farm, comes out, and I'm asking her, "Are you okay? How you doing?" She's like, "I don't know. I'm never up this early. I don't know why that I'm up." And I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, at first I was perceiving it to be millions of UFO, which is just so completely irrational and unreasonable that, over the years, I have amended that to like tens of thousands, right? I mean, just so ridiculously still ridiculous.
Okay.
But this is what I experienced. And one of the people on the Quonset hut, her name is Rose. She was the co-author for Linda and her book about her father. And she happened to say to me, "Well, these are probably your angels." And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, we've been invaded," because I'm still thinking everything's terrible for me. So I started to try to adopt that more positive outlook. And that really kind of was the end of direct interference until 2015, when I'm in this new farm where I'm living now that I was guided to find and live at. It was February of 2015, and I was on GLP and doing whatever I was doing, still being mind controlled and playing along. And I get up to go to the bathroom. It's like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I go to the bathroom, and I'm looking out the window, and I see a star, and it kind of gets my attention. And when I turn around and look back out the window, it starts dancing. It's up, around, all around. It's doing a whole bunch of irregular things.
Okay.
Here we go again. So I go back on the GLP, and I'm, looks like something's about to happen. So anyway, it turns out that this UFO is actually listening to my thoughts. And I had sent a thought to it after I tried to go outside and cross the farm to go visit, that it was just entirely too cold out, because it was like super cold. It was below freezing. All of my winter clothes just weren't cutting it, and I felt extremely vulnerable. So
Okay.
I sent a thought that if it was more warm outside, I'm of half a mind that I would visit. So I went back inside, took my stuff off, and then eventually got to the point where I put my stuff back on and went back outside, and there it is right above the huge maple trees that are on the farm that I live on, right outside, and it's blazing like this golden 8-pointed star, and outside the temperature has been raised. It's like, inviting me. And I live right next to a 4-lane highway, which is completely dead because it's so cold and it's so late. And here I am standing below this blazing UFO star, and I'm still having problems with it. And I chickened out. I started to justify to myself that, this experience is about to end and I should just go ahead and go back in because there's a car coming by at any moment. And that was that, and ever since then, they are in and out of my life. All of this.
So they didn't. There was no contact at that point, and it just went away peacefully without a problem.
Right. There could have been potentially contact there, but I chickened out. And
Okay.
I look back now that with all of my interaction with UFOs, the up close and personal, the perceived abductions, actually, I didn't share with you that there was a regression session that I participated in back in 2009 during the 7-week ordeal. I actually set up with a therapist who was fabulous. She actually used binaural tones with me, and do you understand this? Oh yeah, I'm already into this. Well, what about, do you smoke a little? Uh-huh, I'm totally into that too. She's like, you're going to do fine. So she took me in really deep and took me to that night where my brain was bubbling, right? So I see a being, this little grayish, greenish dude at the head of my bed where my head would have been. And, so I'm seeing him. He's got a smart little hat and a little outfit on. And, this is pretty deep into the regression session at this point. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I was stressing out about the whole thing because now I'm finding out a realization that there was something more going on and that maybe I was being abducted. So she's like, okay, you're stressing out. Just go ahead and raise up out of the house and you'll be fine. We can get back in touch with, little young you and whatever we were doing at the time, right? So I raise up out of the house, and there's the UFO from my dreams and from the experiences. And it's like right there. And right now I'm right in its face, just like some of my dreams. And, I'm completely stressing out. And I'm like, I got to go to the bathroom. Can't we take the expressway out of this regression session? So, there's a lot going on here. And like during this process, looking for understanding of why these things may have been happening to me, I started looking into astrology and my birth chart, which is apparently irregular. I have like 5 or so planets in my sun natal chart or something. Everybody who's looked at it says it, well, there isn't like a lot of people who have looked at it, but the two who have told me that it's, unordinary. And then even backtracking further, when I was in the restaurant business and partying at one of my first jobs, one of the girls that I worked with dragged me out to hang out with her girlfriend and do a tarot card reading.
Okay.
And that tarot card reading was a 7-card reading, and she dealt me 7 major arcana cards. I mean, these 2 girls were flipping out, and I was just along for the ride. I really, couldn't care less. I was there for the drinks and the herb and the girls, and
Yeah.
they're flipping out to where, the girl that I work with is telling everybody about this, crazy tarot reading that I had. And like, can we not talk about it? I don't want to talk about it, because it was kind of telling me that there's, something going on in my life that's significant that I've been avoiding. And
Yeah, it sounds like it.
In retrospect, I found that something like that means that you are not in control of your life, that there is a higher power guiding your life. But that's meaning that I found many years later when I went looking.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, all of this also is superimposed on, again, trying to figure out how things work and trying to lead my life and walk in the footsteps of Jesus, a very non-materialistic life, one that's, not chasing money. And, fundamentally, if, I could figure things out, then maybe I might be able to serve others. It was a very service to self life that I've led in hopes that it might lead to being able to serve others. So, all of that, it plays a part into my perspective of my life, my understanding of reality, because all along the way, I was exposing myself to information too. I was thinking about Tesla, his magnificence of the 369 and the keys to the universe and frequency, vibration, and energy. I was thinking about these things and starting to see commonalities. And I didn't really talk about, so after 2009, as recent as the 2015 UFO experience, I was having health issues, and I started to begin to channel energy, like white light, into my affected areas, to where I was actually finding relief and physical experiences that, okay, wait, my mind is manipulating my reality. I'm affecting, what's going on. And this is the beginning of an understanding of it for me. And, I always kind of like would put these sort of things in my back pocket and utilize them, when I could. I was using visualizations, vocalizations. A lot of it was stemming from what I had learned from the Hobbit Navigator on the Quonset Hut forum about the fundamental nature of reality, which he was explaining as, basically a source synthesis point of polarities. That's how I'm seeing it now. But he was talking in terms of vortex spin, alternating vortex spin.
Okay.
That was the fundamental mechanic that was facilitating how no thing becomes something, how spirit manifests as matter. So,
Okay.
I wasn't really in tune with all of this at the time, but I was listening because he seemed like he understood how things work. He was a dowser, and he claimed to be able to sense anything he focused on. So he had a real deep understanding of reality and was trying to explain to us the fundamental nature of reality through Thomas Townsend Brown work. He would express that we should be looking at the work of Victor Schauberger, because when you look at that, they are the same work but opposing each other. Brown was doing anti-gravity with an explosive spin, and Schauberger was doing gravity with an implosive spin. Like
Okay.
Thomas Townsend Brown is loosely associated with the Philadelphia experiment, where apparently some sort of naval vessel imploded upon itself. And I'm positing that it's probably Thomas Townsend Brown applying the understanding of Victor Schauberger in their work with whoever else was directing this sort of program that would explain the Philadelphia experiment, because Schauberger's work is of implosion, which would be what transcending is, transcending time and space. It's from going from being matter to imploding into itself, into becoming nothing from this current perspective. But it's not nothing. We perceive zero, we perceive the space between us as not having any fundamental value, but it does. It's the underlying field of reality. We live in a four-dimensional density experience. It's 3 dimensions of length, width, and height that is superimposed on that 4th dimension of density. We're 4th density beings. And like when I hear talk about 5th density or 5th dimension, I kind of chuckle because I perceive it as gradations, levels of that 4th dimension of density. It's all density. It's just, frequencies and levels of vibration. It's all the same thing, denser and lighter, encumbering and enlightening. We are energetic light beings fundamentally. And for us to experience this materialistic reality, it is a union of opposites. It's what alchemy is all about. There is a union of the dualistic nature of God, which is the divine masculine and divine feminine principles. I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah, a little bit. We kind of went from some UFOs finding balance to
Right. My apologies. So let's see if I can put this all together. What I'm trying to express is that there has been building fundamental understanding of reality, as well as trying to get my temple in order. It's like a mental, physical, spiritual process that I've been going through my entire life of trying to resolve internal conflict, trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality, finding that balance that we're talking about. And that all came to a head last year when I transcended space-time, which is probably a good time to transition to that story. I had been banned off of Godlike Productions because I've been sharing my understanding that was still building, which conflicts the negative nature that exists on this forum. It's a lot of negative energy that goes on there. I've perceived it as the adversaries type forum.
okay.
It's a tough place to cut your teeth on a forum spiritually. So I was banned from there and ended up on Reddit and found myself on the Experiencer sub and got into some fantastic conversations and ended up in a thread about earth mitosis. And, I was sharing perspectives that, I perceive that cataclysmic earth changes occur when we as a collective do not spiritually get our stuff together. When we don't raise ourselves up enough, the board's wiped clean and we start over.
Got it.
So, and when we do, that's what like maybe disappearing societies signify. And that the concept of earth mitosis happens all the time when any and all sentient beings make choices. That's the explanation per se for the multiverse.
Okay.
So, I was trying to say that, the big perceived earth mitosis shift is always happening, that the people that are talking energetically, there's a big thing coming, that it's always been coming and it's always happening. And that big shift may actually never even be perceived. It may just happen because we've reached critical mass. So anyway, got into this wonderful conversation, and in other threads that I wanted to continue, I didn't want to spend time cooking, so I decided to go out and get some pizza. And I have to go up the road to get it. And during this ride to buy my pizza, I come into revelation, which is because of all the work I've done in my life trying to find the balance, trying to find the resolution of my internal conflicts, trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. I apparently had sufficiently done the work. So I come into revelation. It all resolves fundamentally. I have no explanation as to why this thought came into my head. I wasn't specifically thinking about this on the ride. I was more excited about continuing, what I was continuing. So anyway, after that revelation came the thought, which was of an understanding. I've attached the concept of enlightenment to this thought. It was an enlightening thought in regards to the revelation. And that thought was, that means I can, pass my arm through this road sign, which was, quickly approaching because I'm doing 60, 65, 70 miles an hour. And as soon as I had that second thought, I am all of a sudden experiencing myself in two perspectives. I've got this little kind of like 10, 15% perspective of me driving up the road, and then this major perspective of me actually in the passenger side of my car now, driving on the shoulder of the road right next to the sign. And I've got my arm out the window and I'm passing my arm through the road sign. They're in complete resonance, in harmony. I couldn't tell the difference between my arm and the road sign itself, right?
Yeah.
So, I come out of that experience and I'm buzzing super high. And the first thought that comes into my head was, this means I can fly, which is in reference to all of my dreams where I was able to fly, whether lucid or not, which I had always conceived of, should be relatable in our conscious experience. It should be realized. So I'm buzzing and I'm thinking I can phase through the roof of my car and fly off. And what I'm experiencing is like a stay or go moment. And it's related to that understanding, that promise I made myself as a little boy that I would make a difference and I'd figure out how things work. And like, this is it. If I can figure this out, this might be it. So, of course, I stayed. I didn't go, and I'm buzzing for a couple of days. And next thing I know, I'm starting to put the understanding of the experience to equation. And I'm being guided in that earth mitosis thread by somebody who has an offensive name and who has since deleted their part of the conversation, which happens a lot for me in this process. There's a lot of people who have come in and engage me and then backtrack on the engagement to completely deleting it or, deleting their accounts. It's interesting to experience. Anyway, this person is kind of helping me work through it and brings up, order of operations. And I'm a server by trade in the hospitality industry. So, I'm not thinking about these sort of things in relationship to any sort of equation. I'm just kind of going with the flow and where I feel like I'm being guided at this point. And so I get like halfway through this, equation that seems to be forming, and this person disappears. So I drop out of this earth mitosis thread because it's just a random person's thread that this just kind of took off on. And I create my own thread in the enlightenment subreddit called the fundamental ascension equation, because again, I was perceiving that transcending of space-time as ascending in consciousness as well. I'm seeing the sameness in these things. So, it's kind of playing out, and I'm perceiving that, all of my life had meaning. There was reason behind it. That transcending of space-time, when I had that stay or go moment, it all made sense to me. It all clarified my life, what happened, why it was all going. It all has meaning, and it's all about this. And, I need to, figure all of that out. So, I'm starting to see things in a different way to like, the significance of my hot bath meditation and the experience I had right before it with an ant, with a queen ant of all things, because I had been having problems with ants, and I was killing them. I was wiping them out, and that was
Okay.
conflicting for me. But I had decided that I needed to, find balance with them and not kill them, and either clean up my own acts so they didn't, end up on my counter, or just accept that they were there and try to find, balance with them. And so
Okay.
here's this queen ant, and I'm feeling like I could wipe them all out by killing her, but I, was like thanked her instead, and went into my hot bath meditation, where I get a whole lot of my information. It resolves the polarities of high heart rate and low breath rate, because it's a very hot bath where I meditate. And
Okay.
this produces standing waves. And I do it in an active way. And it resolves around what I call the Tesla ritual, which is his ritual of threes that he would apply. Going back to when I brought up Tesla earlier, I attracted his understanding of his work, the magnificence of the 369 and the keys to the universe, by applying his ritual of threes in my hot bath meditation. Water itself is reflective of spirit. It's, a lot of cultures and teachings make that direct association. So the water
Okay.
itself has information. I mean, if we look at the work of Emoto, that where he's been able to show that specific thoughts change the water itself. When it's frozen, it can look like, perfect snowflakes. When you're sending the water love and thank you, that's the sort of work that I do in my hot bath meditations. Is I'm, thinking positive thoughts
Okay.
in a repetitive way, of like thank you and love you. And I know that I'm infusing not only the water, but my surroundings with these positive thoughts, because our thoughts affect our reality. So,
So
yeah,
you
all
went from all negative thoughts and now you're going into all positive thoughts. Did your life get better at that point?
absolutely balanced and positive. I realized I was the source of my conflict, and I made an effort to change that for a whole bunch of years to resolve it. It's not perfect. In this sort of work, we find that, we're not looking for perfect. It's more of like a, do the best you can sort of thing, and that's enough. So, I see the remainder of the equation in my meditation, and I go back to Reddit and I finish the equation. And as soon as I hit the enter carriage, the return carriage, I tapped into the 0 9 point. Like energy just opened up for me, and it was just so extreme. It I didn't know what happened, and I'm trying to understand it, and it seems really good. Everything's flowing. It seems like the house is flowing, the walls are flowing, the earth seems to be moving. Everything seems really malleable to me. And, my thought process is, just, focus on having good thoughts.
Hmm.
And, you know, I was able to begin to relate the experience, and I had, set aside a subreddit called Lieberman, where, I felt like I was going to be sharing something, and lo and behold, all of a sudden I have something to share, because, something significant just seemed to happen to me, and it's in like an equation like format. It took 10 days for that energy flow to kind of subside, and 2 months to where it had been like, now I'm not perceiving it, but it has a mind of its own, and it is reacting to information I'm taking in or sharing. And it really resembles what I perceive as spiritual chills that have always been like affirming my thoughts, my emotions, my actions. It's like, okay, yeah, this is good. When I get this sort of thing, it's affirming, the direction or perspective I'm forming or going in.
Okay.
So, it was like 2 months I didn't sleep. And really within the past year, I'm not exactly sure how much I have slept since I've tapped in. It really has become a function of meditating through the night and never really realizing that I've fallen asleep or I've woken up unless I've managed to have a dream, and they are fairly rare. So
Okay.
going back to the tapping in of the 09 point, I perceive this as the Holy Spirit, Kundalini, Chi. It seems to be all the same thing to me.
Okay.
So, I go outside and I'm trying to relax and, is it going to be strong out here? Because it seems like it's local and non-local in its nature. I'm producing it, but it's also, interacting with me. And I'm on the porch and I look up and there's a UAP. It's silver and black, and I'm throwing two thumbs up because this just changed my life. Something significant happened. And then, not too long later, there's like this Lear supersonic looking jet that is, super low and banking all around the farm, the house, from the north side to the west side to the south side. And it's showing me its top side in the bank. So, like, I immediately got two confirmations, two affirmations that I'm pretty sure what I had just done was complete the great work of alchemy. In the books that I've read about alchemy, they tell you that you get acknowledged because it's like psionic work that, other people understand that you are partaking in and finishing. Like for me, ever since I've tapped in, and since I've modeled the equation, which I perceive allows other people to tap in, I get a sense of potentially when other people have recreated my work and have tapped in a disturbance of the force like perception. The energy kicks up out of nowhere where I'm not experiencing it at other times. It's random and it's odd, and it's like, okay, maybe somebody just tapped in.
Okay.
So, I started the Lieberman sub where I shared the information. The first thread that I shared the unity equation on, which is based around the Holy Trinity of mind, matter, and spirit and their relationship. It's a Holy Trinity, and the equation itself is the perspective of Source, Spirit, God, or the One in two dimensions from the perspective of the Holy Trinity by a fourth density being. So it's a complete cycle of understanding. I mean, the original equation itself doesn't really look like the current equation. It had all of these weird, strange, what I call demarcation lines, because I was still coming into an understanding of it. Over this past year, I perceive my knowledge as evolving. Like I came into an all at once understanding, and since then, since I've tapped into the energy, it's been evolving like the universe is unfolding itself to me. So now I understand it today much more than I did before. And within the last few months, I was guided to modeling it, which is the unified field circuit, which you may or may not have, Ben, that you can share or not share. I'm sure a lot of people tuning into this podcast
So, yeah,
are
you sent me a
familiar.
couple of screenshots. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. I don't know if you can share them, but
Yeah, we can bring
those,
them up.
okay. Why don't you give that a shot?
Yeah,
These
just continue, and I'll while you're I'll bring them up. Sorry.
Okay, so these models themselves of are of the equation, are to me again reflecting God, but also reflecting us. Like, to me, I perceive them as a self-portrait because it's the Holy Trinity. It's the matter. It's the understanding that, the Christian Holy Trinity, the Father is the mind. It's the solar masculine, energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Holy Spirit is the divine feminine. It's spirit. It is the lunar, solar negative energy. The masculine is the positive energy. It is all the same thing in a conjunctive like perspective. The mind is magnetism. Again, positive masculine energy, and the spirit is electricity. They're perceived as being all the same thing. The philosophy behind the unity equation is that everything is more the same than it is different. And this is comes from me asking myself what comes first while I was coming up with the equation. What comes first, mind or spirit? And I would look at it from the perspective of the number zero, because that would come first in a linear perspective. And zero, no thing, spirit most resembles to me, whereas mind I perceive as something.
Okay.
So I started making the association between 0, 3, 6, and 9 with mind, matter, and spirit, such that, okay, so this is great. Bentoff's cosmic egg. When I first saw this, after I completed the unity equation, I saw the equation and the flow in his cosmic egg. You see, the top part of this egg is a polarity. We might perceive it as the mind polarity, and this bottom part of the egg is the spirit polarity. And you see them on the left hand side of his egg. They're coming to join together and then move in through this middle synthesis line. It's polarity, polarity, and synthesis in the middle. So this reflects the unity equation. Bentoff has so much right. His book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, is outstanding. I can't recommend it enough. He
Okay.
missed the circuit placement because this little torus, thing in the middle that he has here that's reflected as a white and black hole should actually be more towards the left-hand side. That middle of his is the synthesis of the unity equation, that polarity synthesis vertical axis. That the synthesis in the middle of the unity equation is this black and white hole that he has in the middle of his cosmic egg, but his is misplaced because that source synthesis point is actually in the asymmetrical center. We find support for this in vortex math and the work of Marco Rodin. He also has identified that the source synthesis point is in the asymmetrical center. You'll find it in his circuit where he has the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 pattern looks like an infinity symbol. And then the 3, 9, 6, 6, 9, 3 pattern is like a triangle like pattern. And, he hasn't quite put it all together. He is focused on finding the 0 point energy through the torus, which is the source of the energy. But we need a proper circuit to tap that energy. And that proper circuit is in the unity equation structure and understanding, which is almost in the Bentoff's cosmic egg. He just misses it. I don't know, Ben, if you can put up the unity equation real quick and then maybe transition to the unified field circuits. Okay, so you see here in the unity equation, I actually just did this today. You see
Okay.
mind up top on the top left, that's the mind polarity of mind, matter, and spirit, correct. And then spirit on the bottom is the other polarity. And this is what's called the alchemical wedding in alchemy, the union of opposites. It's this union of mind and spirit, the divine masculine and feminine energies, magnetism and electricity. It is their union that is gravity. It's the how and the why that we have our four-dimensional conscious experience, which we see in the middle line. You see, the middle line is mind, the relationship of mind and spirit manipulates and creates the relationship between matter and spirit. Okay, so that's
Okay.
the alchemical wedding. Now, the top left line of mind, you'll see that it has a relationship. It leads to what that top left hand line is saying is mind manipulates the relationship between matter and spirit. And the bottom line gives definition to spirit. Spirit creates and manipulates mind and matter. So what we're saying here is spirit is fundamental. We might equate it with God, we might equate it with source, we might equate it with the universe, right? There's all sorts of perspectives for it. It's infinite intelligence. But since I have been looking at the Holy Trinity, I stuck with this basic Trinity because I'm able to keep God within the equation. So the
Okay.
left hand side of the equation is the left hand side of Bentoff's cosmic egg. And it is split at the polarity synthesis, polarity vertical axis. And you can see these symbols between the terms. They're like half infinity signs. They're relationship. It just simply means relationship. And the whole thing affects itself to where we're looking at the right side of the equation, the vertical axis of acceptance, and willpower. What that really reflects is the lifetime of work. Okay. This is a lifetime of work of forgiving, of accepting, of finding that internal balance, of trying to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, of realizing the PTSD of all the UFO alien interference in my life to one of catalyst, to one of balance, to one I'm no longer in conflict with. All of this acceptance and forgiveness builds willpower, right? So this is signifying and attaching two aspects of this work, because my search for an understanding of how things work was about manifestation, about manipulating matter. How was Jesus creating his miracles? How do these things happen? How are the aliens, demons, angels phasing in and out of the walls? How is all this happening? So that part, that right side of the equation, that vertical line has to be done first. All of the work, the understanding, the acceptance had to be done first to come into realization of the left side of the equation, which explains ascension and transcending space-time. So it's a multi-dimensional equation that we're looking at it from, the top left-hand side. We're reading it across. We're reading it across from the bottom line. We're reading it across, horizontally from the middle line, but we're also reading it vertically, and how all of it affects each other. The right side of the equation has to be done first to realize the left side. And then once all of this kind of meshes, you realize the unity part, because you've transcended, something has happened once you've put it all together, that you've realized unity. That's what happened to me. So the expectation now that this has been modeled in the unified field circuits, that recreating the circuits in 2 dimensions on a piece of paper with a pencil and a ruler should tap the 0 9 point for the person who's undertaking the work, because it's the same thing. It's reflecting the equation that tapped the 0 9 point. I did it online. There's no difference between a digital, finishing of the equation than us doing it, with a pencil and paper. So if it's done correctly and reflects the correct ratios and understanding of, resolving the duality, resolving the conflict by including both. There's in the circuits themselves, we're looking at, the polarities of mind and spirit. We're looking at asymmetry and symmetry. We're looking at straight lines and curves, the torus in the circuit, implied and obvious. We're resolving both, because this work concludes that the answer is always both and neither, never either or. That's a fundamental understanding of reality, because God, source itself, if we dial it back to what came first, however we perceive it, would have a dualistic nature itself. It would be everything and nothing at the same time, but we couldn't perceive it. There's nothing there to contrast itself to. It exists, and it doesn't exist at the same time. So this thing that we perceive as God, infinite intelligence, source, spirit, whatever, evolves to experience itself as separate. So we might see like a circle with 2 arms coming off of it, with 2 more circles, and that original circle has like a plus minus next to it, representing that it is both everything and nothing at the same time, positive and negative. And now these 2 circles that we're imagining splitting off of this one, but exist in conjunction to it, are actually the positive and the negative separate, the divine masculine and divine feminine energies. They now are existing as separate energetic entities, as opposed to one united energetic entity. It's, we might perceive this as the number 0 and the numbers 1 and 2, right? The number 0 split into its dualistic nature, and it's now 1, which is positive, and 0, which is negative. I'm sorry, we could do maybe 1 and 2. So 0, 1, and 2, the 1 is positive, or the 1 is negative, the 2 is negative. There's a lot of ways that we can perceive this. I often use the 0, 3, 6, and 9. I'm also perceiving it as 9 coming first, 0, 1, and 2 in this cycle. And I know I just probably made this way more confusing than I had.
You're all right.
Yeah, the whole thing is malleable, and the only reason why we aren't perceiving and experiencing it as malleable is because we've conditioned ourselves our whole life with limitations and belief that hold us back from experiencing the malleability of our reality. So, yeah, recreating the work should tap the 0 9 point. It should lead to over unity, an understanding of anti-gravity, and the transcending of space-time, both spiritually and mechanically, on individual and collective levels. It is experienced first on an individual level. At least it was for me, right? Like, if we're going to have free energy out of this particular work, it would come from the model and recreating the model. So it's perceived that tapping in mechanically for people who understand and are looking to do these things, like Marco Rodin, other electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, you know, everyday electricians, or people who might want to begin to learn to understand this and build their own, you know, free energy power sources, it could probably be done fairly easily, you know, considering that it's really all about a circuit, which is wires. You know, it might come down to, we find that the circuit might benefit from certain materials, and, you know, being an open and or a closed system, there's, you know, going to be a lot of variables that might affect the sort of results that we get, because this isn't really 1 + 1 = 2. You know, we're basically breaking the rules of physics here, because the unified field circuit itself is perceived as spiritual technology. Just recreating it in 2 dimensions should tap the 0-9 point, which will bring the energy, which is the underlying fundamental medium field, right? Which contains understanding, experience, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So now all of a sudden people are going to be more tuned in. This should evolve others in a reverse like fashion that I experienced it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So
You know,
Yeah.
we can make the device, but unless your spirit is in balance, you're not getting anywhere. It won't be revealed to you.
so I think that is certainly possible. I think that it's also possible that doing the work actually helps build the understanding and helps complete some of the circuits that, you know, if the work is completed correctly, that anybody and everybody can tap in on a level that they're ready for. Since I may have been the first person to tap into it and had managed to put myself into position, it was rather significant for me. I don't necessarily think it's going to be that significant for other people. It's probably going to be a process, because it was a process to get to the point to where I tapped in. So once somebody taps in, it's going to be a process of them coming into the understanding, coming into the experience, being open enough to receive these things, perhaps taking initiative to, you know, build on the understanding, build on the experience. You know, like with my hot bath meditation, the waves that I'm able to generate when I have my breath rate down, you know, around 1.5 breaths a minute to 2 breaths a minute, in and around that range, and my heart is beating really fast, those waves are like the same waves that act of their own accord and are intelligent, that I'm connected with after the fact. So my understanding of how to generate the waves also seems to encourage them, seems to attract them, such that when I was recently experiencing hospice with my mother, well, let's backtrack. The October of this year, 21 through the 23rd, I spent 3 days experiencing this energy on a different level than I have. It responds to music, it responds to emotion, it responds to information. So I'm jamming out to some Led Zeppelin, because I'm trying to push the third aspect of my work, which is called a declaration of liberation. The first is the unity equation, and trying to teach the understanding that it had. And then that process brought me into an understanding of how to model it. And since then, I've been trying to share, hey, let's recreate this and see what happens and compare notes. And this is what I'm thinking might happen for you. Let's see what happens. Help me out, proof the work. And the third part was a declaration of liberation, which is a perspective of the work and how we might proof it by freeing ourselves of our systems of control, of government, of the money system, by using social media and the same understanding that is going into this work of utilizing our intention, of utilizing our willpower, of utilizing our connections to God, our faith, together to free ourselves of these limitations that we set upon ourselves externally through government and through these money systems, because we're consenting to them. We're allowing all of this to happen. So we're responsible for it. All the complaining that we do about it is, we're spinning our wheels. So, if we want to do something about it, this is the third part of my work that to me is the easiest. Like, to go around and try to convince people to maybe recreate the unified field circuit, and it's going to help, with a lot of things in people's lives, or to teach them the long way of getting their temples in order and starting to resolve their own conflicts. And, these are two different ways that people can help uplift themselves. Well, so would be the declaration of liberation if we freed ourselves from our external limitations, our external demons, because goodness knows how much conflict government and monetary systems cause each of us internally. I mean, we're all just so conflicted over it, and we conflict with each other over it. So that's the third part. And I've been putting a lot of effort into that recently, that the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, I was trying to manifest us freeing ourselves from these systems of control. And during that time, I was listening to music on my porch, to where the Holy Spirit, the tapped in energy, the Kundalini, the Chi, that intelligent energy connected with me. And it was like I was giving energetic birth. I mean, I was in my chair, my legs were up, and I'm bouncing back and forth. The Holy Spirit is, it was different. It's hard to explain. And it was perceived that like everything around me was shaking, flowing. I mean, my chair was bouncing up and down, and I got a guy who lives upstairs from me, and he's always been like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never experienced anything like that. And he's very intimidated and scared of these sort of things. So, who knows what he may or may not have experienced. And it may actually be that these things that I'm experiencing are on a subtle level. They aren't actually happening on a physical level, even though I am perceiving them physically. I really don't know. I don't have any confirmation. I can show you a picture of a chair, my chair outside, that broke on the second day, the 22nd, to where I felt like I was inseminating, with the energy and how it was kind of making me flow. And then the third day, which was the 23rd of this year of October, which was the birthday of the unity equation. That's when I finished it in 23, was on October 23rd of 23. So this 3-day energetic thing that I go through, while I was trying to manifest the declaration of liberation going viral, I kept trying to explain to people that there's an energetic opportunity that we have right now, right before the American election, that maybe if we can somehow tap into this virally, that maybe we can free ourselves. But it doesn't appear like we're ready for that right now. it may be a little bit ahead of its time, but it's still something that we can do at any time. This sort of understanding, is not fixed. It can be applied at any time that we could free ourselves, because it's an understanding of willfully intending to free ourselves and then letting go of the results and letting source spirit God handle it. At some point in time, the viral aspect will reach the critical mass to where what are the governments of the world going to do? Say no from surrendering to the people of the planet? I mean, if they did, we would find out who serves who, right?
Well, I think first we need to look at just balancing our lives. Would start out the first thing, get our mind in the right place before
Indeed.
we go to any other steps forward.
Right. And that actually is perceived as being solved in a way from, getting away from these external control structures. I mean, we have these beliefs that we form that we've got to have them. If we didn't have them, everything's going to be a mess, without perceiving at the same time that we have them and everything is a mess. Right?
Yeah, a little bit of a contradiction there, huh?
Right. So, I mean, we keep saying that it won't work and that it won't happen. And I'm sitting here going, well, I'm perceiving that the systems and these, they're causing a lot of our conflict. And if we remove ourselves from them, maybe we're removing a lot of our conflict, and these internal things, these internal conflicts no longer have power over us. And we start to begin to find that balance you're talking about, because we exercise our external demons will help to start exercise our internal demons. We'll find balance that way, in a reverse way that I found it. I exercised all of my internal demons to where my external demons have resolved to not being a problem either. As within, so without. The inverse of that is also true. As without, so within. Our external lives affect our internal lives. As above, so below. The inverse of that is true. As below, so above. Fundamental knowledge is higher understanding, and that is what we're working with here. We're looking at, in these unified field circuits, God going from everything to its dualistic nature, which is evolution. We see this in mitosis of cells, right? I was kind of explaining how that dualistic perspective of God experience itself separate, and it's now the divine masculine, divine feminine, positive and negative charges, mind and spirit. These two energies are what alchemy is all about. It's their union that is matter. It's the Father and the Holy Spirit that forms the Son, Jesus. We're all that same creation. We all have the same potential that Jesus carries. We just have set limits and formed beliefs that this isn't the case. We are all fundamentally a reflection of God. We actually exist in direct opposition to God, which is not a bad thing. It's the opposition means reflection. So we are fundamentally,
Yeah, it'd be a better way to say it.
well, so we're fractal reflections of God, right? We are fundamentally God, but we're not quite on his level. We're like at the
We're just
beginning.
born in his image. I get it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
The particle is fundamentally the wave, as matter is of spirit, as we are made in his image. It's all the same thing, right?
Yes.
The how and the why are the same. So that's what this work is all about, is this fundamental understanding of source synthesis of the polarities. It would have been what happened first. What came first, what came second, what came third, what came fourth. It's a cycle of evolution, which has a destructive, creative cycle to it. So the
Mhm.
first part is when God splits to experience itself. That's the destructive aspect of evolution. Then these two dualistic perspectives of it unite to form matter. So that's the creative aspect of evolution. And from there, the creation itself evolves through the conflict. It's that either or choice that we all have been making that is one of conflict instead of the choice of both and neither, which reflects God in us, because we both, God and us, both contain the dualistic nature. We have the divine feminine and masculine energies within us. So when we choose one or the other, we are going into conflict with ourselves and in conflict with God instead of flowing with both choices or choosing no choice at all. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's like two choices, but we're making the wrong choice. We're making the choice of the either or instead of flowing with both choices or making no choice at all. The answer is always both or neither, never either or. So this work resolves all of it. It resolves all of it. For me, in the jailbreak thread, I claimed all paradoxes are resolved. This is a fundamental understanding of how we manipulate and create our reality because it's an understanding of how reality was manipulated and created, originally. So we, the sun, matter, Jesus, all of us, the potential, the creation evolves through the conflict of that either or choice to where we eventually come into our full creative potential, which is one of realizing the sameness of our reality as opposed to focusing on the differences, because the sameness takes us closer to source, the spirit and God, where the
Hmm.
differences take us further away. The closer we get to source, spirit, God, the more we come into our infinite potential. And that's what I'm perceiving this work as, is tapping the infinite potential because of the fundamental nature of it.
Yeah, I think the difference is a waste of time. Whoever thinks that way is short sighted and needs to rethink their life. But
Yeah, it's not all bad. I mean, fundamentally, fundamentally, reality, existence, source, spirit, God is a fractal and reflective, self reinforcing, reciprocating system. I mean, so are we. God is, reality is. That's how it functions. It has a relationship between itself. The unity equation is perceived as God's law of relationship. It's also perceived as the ninth hermetic principle. It's perceived as solving the alchemical great work. It's the philosopher's stone. To me, I perceive it as the holy grail. It solves the hero's journey. To me, it's like all of these things because I see the sameness in all things. To me, I have a very broad but narrow perspective because I see the sameness in all the fundamental perspective. I look at things in dualities and trinities, and in those dualities and trinities, I'm identifying the sameness of these opposing polarities and then going, okay, now I understand how things work from seeing the sameness in all of these polarities, dualities that we have conflicts about. I mean, we go to war and fight over religious things, which are specific, which are basically fundamentally different perspectives of the same thing. It's what's going on, what we're doing to ourselves is ridiculous because we don't understand the paradoxical nature of reality and the inversion that exists. That we think that the brain is creating the fields, that, matter is what creates gravity. You know, gravity comes from matter, and it's a very hard problem of consciousness, materialistic, left-brained reality that we're imbalanced towards. And it's perceived that this work has the potential to help connect circuits, to help maybe adjust perspective, because now you're kind of, you know, if you're tapped in, you've taken the time to understand the work, to assess, you know, whether or not it's the right choice for you to make. You know, you've given consideration to the torus, the circuit, the ratios, the structure, you know, the duality, the alchemical transmutation that this might change your life. You know, it's perhaps a pretty big, you know, question or choice that we're all facing right now to actually proof this work, which I'm desperate to happen. You know, I really need assistance in proofing this work because there's very little feedback at this point. I've had some people claim that they've recreated it to where it's brought some experience, it's brought visions. One particular person related to me that they were able to have a vision to where the unified field circuit itself began to unfold itself for them, and they were able to see it multidimensionally. And that led me to think about what we were looking at, and I started to perceive what I'm calling toroidal math from the equation and from the circuit, which would be in harmonization with Marco Rodin's work of vortex math, where he mapped the torus. My work will lead to toroidal math mapping the vortex. It's a contradiction that, you know, works together. His work had to come first. There had to be the understanding and the mapping of the torus. All the folks who are chasing free energy from the torus are getting it half right. The energy is actually coming from the torus itself, but it is the specific circuit that taps that energy, and it's that circuit that reflects fundamental reality, the knowledge, the understanding. The circuit is the mind, the torus is spirit. Do you see the associations I'm making, Nathan? You know
No,
that.
I understand. I also understand the circuit's already been built. Like
Yeah.
no, hold on. You're more into the spiritual circuit and unlocking that, and I'm telling you the physical circuit has already been built. And it's interesting to hear both halves of it, because usually on this channel we deal in the actual circuit, the physical rendering of how to make it. And we have an individual by the name of Gerald who's already done it, and he uses the spiritual aspects in order to create it. And much like you, he's in perfect balance and, you know what I mean, harmony within himself and you know, God himself. So I have no problem with what's going on. I could see both halves, and I completely believe both.
Yeah, I would be so interested in his circuit. I'd love to see, you know, its structure, its shape, and I'd love to hear the story behind it, because I am I'm positing that to tap the 0-9 point, it's done spiritually first. The two-dimensional drawing, the replication, should be enough to do it on the individual spiritual level. Most people would probably do the diagram first. So if the diagram, if Gerald's work actually works, if you've actually, you know, replicated his circuit two-dimensionally on paper, that should tap it for you individually as well, if his circuit is correct. I'm not saying it is or it isn't.
No,
I'm just saying how it worked for me.
There's no judgment on either side.
Right, of course. I'd love to see his work. I'm all about comparing notes and sharing information.
No, I'll just tell you. He tells us all the time. Uh, he got it from God Himself, and he
Exactly.
was guided from that to do it. So you're right in the fact that spiritually you have to be set in the right mindset and everything else, and the belief and the understanding and the balance in your life. Then things like this can happen where they manifest themselves in reality, where you get everything together in a physical unit that matches exactly what your spiritual unit is.
Bingo. The spiritual philosophical work comes first, and the scientific work is what proofs, you know, um, supports the experience and the understanding. And that's part of our imbalance, from my perspective, is that we have been exalting science over spirituality and philosophy, and just focusing on the one. Like in our, medical industry, we want to reduce everything down to like, hey, this pill, this one method is what solves this one problem. It's like a one-to-one direct relationship. And, fundamental reality doesn't work that way. I'm recently been talking to people about how our thoughts and our emotions affect our physical well-being, and it's like I'm talking a different language to them. They don't see the correlation or the relationship. I've been trying to share with people, you will never catch me in the doctor's office. The diagnosis is bad news from the beginning with the way that the mind works. I mean, when we start thinking about placebo and you're going out and getting a diagnosis thinking you might be sick, and now all of a sudden there's some sort of affirmation, well, you're basically screwed, right? But if you never go to get the diagnosis, you're manipulating a flux state, like the particle and wave phenomena that is seen in the double slit experiment, right? It takes the observer to manifest the wave into the particle. And it's actually, if you look into Tom Campbell's work, we find that it's the recording of the information that is what really matters, not the actual observation. It has to be recorded. So once you go and get diagnosed, and once you have somebody confirming this thought that you have created that may or may not be true, that you're sick and that you have a problem, well, you're good and screwed now, because it's it's been recorded that you have a problem. Like for me, when I have problems, I perceive them as opportunities to learn and to overcome. And I am constantly finding that I'm able to heal myself, or at least, so what I'm saying here. It's there's so much potential that underlies this work that hoping that you folks decide to help me proof it sometime and let me know what you find. I'm looking to share that sort of work publicly.
Well, let me ask you, do you have a YouTube channel?
I have a YouTube account. I don't have a channel.
Okay. People are asking in the chat. Is why I'm asking.
I don't. I'm not much of an audio visual guy. I'm really more interested in people who do that sort of thing to maybe help me, so they can actually perhaps get into the work itself, and maybe they too might benefit if they have a YouTube channel, if they have podcasts. I'm looking to share this avenue through other I'm looking to share the information through other avenues, but I'm not really trying to be an AV guy. I'm not trying to have my own YouTube channel. I'm not trying to monetize this. I'm looking for help in various avenues, in the proofing and in the sharing of the proofing.
Well, how did they get a hold of you?
So I moderate the Lieberman subreddit on Reddit. So it's r/Lieberman, Lieberment. My email is Soloma369 at protonmail.com. You can email me. I'm I'm really not trying to have direct messaging, personal contacts. I want to have public discourse. I want the work to be done publicly so it can't be hidden. I want the work to, be solved, resolved soon, because if it's nothing, I'd like to move on with my life and not trouble all of you and not, waste everybody's time. But I don't perceive that to be the case.
No, I think you're on the right path. So I think people will start to pass the message along.
I appreciate that. I haven't been watching the stream. I don't know, if you guys had a decent audience tonight or if we've got a good pop. I apologize to everybody for my long-windedness. It's my
Don't
nature.
even worry about it. Absolutely amazing life story going on there. It was interesting the entire time.
I appreciate that, Nathan.
Well, right on. Well, we are at 2 hours and 40 minutes. We did go a long time tonight. So it seems like we're at the end. So I want to thank you for coming in and sharing today. I really do appreciate it. I was thoroughly entertained through the whole thing, and it was absolutely interesting. And I absolutely do believe in the same things you do in the balance.
Yeah, that was really awesome of you coming on, and a lot of what you said resonated with me specifically.
I appreciate that, Ben. And yes, Nathan, balance really is key. I perceive balance leads to a more positive perspective. And I have been saying a lot recently, I am a glass 2/3 full kind of guy. It's that, neutral and positive. It's all good in that, in that range. So I no longer perceive it half full or half empty. It's 2/3 full for me. It's always good,
Yeah. Right on. I appreciate that. A lot of love in the chat for you here.
Outstanding. Much love back to everybody who jumped in and decided to participate. I would love to perhaps be back on your show. Maybe we can do something smaller and shorter if you guys ever decide to actually proof the work yourselves, or if somebody reaches out to you and is interested in it. Let's keep the door open to perhaps talking again.
Absolutely. I would really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Cool. Yeah, thank you, Ben. Anything else I can do before?
No, that's it, man. Thank you very much. You've been an outstanding guest tonight.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, guys.
Look forward to talking to you later.
Thank you, everybody in the chat out there. I appreciate all your comments. I wasn't able to put them up today. We were just listening in. So thank you very much and have a great night, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. This was awesome.
Thank you.